And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. It is Monday, January 27th. I am Josh Engleman here to break down a 10-game NBA slate if you play on DraftKings, 12 games if you play on FanDuel. But the wild part is we got 2 games that start at 7. We've got 5 games that start at 7:30. Then we've got 2 more at 8. And then we get the final game on DraftKings at 8:30. So 10 games in an hour and a half. Then you get a 9 o'clock and a 9:30 on FanDuel. This is going to be a sprint. We're going to lock these 2 games. We're going to get all of this ridiculous news for the 7:30 games. So we're going to get a ton of news from like 6:50 to 7:10. Greg and I will be live on playback at 7 o'clock breaking it all down. We're going to get all those swaps and all that news in for 7:30. And then we still have 3 more games to go at that point. And they're the faster games. The 2 8 o'clock games are pretty massively owned on one side. The late night hammer of Washington and Dallas looks like it's the most owned game on the slate. We are going to have a lot of fun today. But we got to do it pretty quick. Not that we have anybody behind us. Because we're on our way to the Super Bowl at this point. No NFL show on after us. We've got NHL strategy show at 12. We got a lot to talk about. Although there's going to be a bunch of spots where we don't really dig in all that much. So, morning, everybody. Hope you guys had a good weekend. I did. And now we're here. Back for the week once again. Breaking it all down the same way we always do. So let's get started. Let's just get it in right now. Let's get to it. We're starting it off. Los Angeles Lakers, 6-point favorites in Charlotte, 222 total. Now, for the Lakers, AD is probable. LeBron is probable. Rui is questionable. Gabe Vincent is questionable. And in the Lakers' last game, they finally got Jared Vanderbilt back. So this is a game with a 94.1 pace. This is the 3rd slowest game on the slate for me. Orlando, Miami is at 92.7. And then I've got Houston, Boston at 94. Lakers, Charlotte at 94. And I almost said a lot of different names. Kings, Nets, 94.8. So we've got a pack of games that are pretty slow. Clippers, Phoenix as well, but not on the DraftKings slate. So not the best game in terms of pace. Lakers lose 2.3 possessions below their average here. We're not getting any real ownership. DraftKings or FanDuel for the Lakers. Nobody made it to 10%. Optimal rate for me on DraftKings and FanDuel. Nobody made it to 10%. Now, those Q tags will matter. If we happen to get Rui out and Gabe Vincent out, I wouldn't be surprised to see increased minutes for Dorian Finney-Smith. I think Dalton Connect then becomes, a reasonable value option. Probably doesn't matter too much for LeBron or Reeves or AD or Christie at this point. But the status of Rui and Gabe Vincent can create a little bit of value. I'm not sure. I don't get the sense that Jared Vanderbilt is going to be able to play enough minutes to matter, but he'll definitely soak up something. But I think Connect would get a pretty decent bump if we see Gabe Vincent and Rui out. In theory, Shake Milton could re-enter the rotation a little bit. I don't think that we'd be paying attention to him in this spot, though. When it comes to the pay-ups for the Lakers, you could kind of go either direction for me, and I wouldn't have a big preference. Whether you want to go LeBron at 9,900 on DraftKings, power forward only, or 10-4 for AD at center, I'm fine with it. But I think the more likely scenario is getting to someone like Dorian Finney-Smith if we get 1 or 2 of Rui and Gabe Vincent out. Not too much here for the Lakers. Now, on the Hornets side, Cody Martin is already out. Obviously, Brandon Miller is out. Salon's with the G League team. But we don't have any other Q tags or anything right now for Charlotte. We also don't have any interest in Charlotte. Negative 3.5 pace here for the Hornets. Massive, massive pace down spot overall for both of these teams, but it hits Charlotte in an even bigger way. Lakers and Charlotte are 22nd and 23rd on the season in pace. There's no ownership going to anybody. 6% to an $8,200 Mark Williams. 10% on FanDuel to a $3,900 Josh Okogie. I didn't get anybody higher than 5% optimal, which was Mark Williams. I only got Mark Williams to 16% chance of a boom. That's a really low number. Mark Williams is 8,200. I have his target score on today's slate at 51 fantasy points. That's 10 points clear of his projection. Charlotte looks awful. They're one of the lowest owned teams. Like, Brooklyn's really low owned. Orlando's really low owned. The Pelicans are really low owned. But so are Memphis, Charlotte, Houston. I mean, there's a lot of teams that are sub 20% in the aggregate. So I don't have much to say here for Charlotte or the Lakers. Obviously, any lineups you have with LeBron or AD or LaMelo are completely reasonable on a day like today. I don't anticipate having much of this game at all. Just out of curiosity, I actually ran Sims before we got started. So I ran the DraftKings Sims before we got started. We got 6% of AD, 6% of LeBron, 4% of Mark Williams, 2% of Austin Reeves. So that kind of explains exactly what we're getting out of this game, which is very, very little. Game number 2. The Detroit Pistons are 10.5-point dogs in Cleveland. 235 total. I got a 98 pace here. That's like middle of the pack for today. Basically, we have two groups of pace. We've got the 98s, 99s, and we've got the 94s. And this is part of the 98s. Now, Pistons are a little interesting today. Tobias Harris is questionable for this one. That is important because Tobias Harris plays 32, 33, 34 minutes a night, depending on the day. So that will have a trickle-down effect in minutes. We saw Sar Thompson play 30 when Tobias Harris went down early in their last game. Only guy getting double digits ownership on either DraftKings or FanDuel is 13% to Jalen Duren right now. Yes, Tobias Harris is questionable with a post-traumatic headache. I don't know what that is. But what I do know is that there's not a lot of interesting stuff going on here for the Pistons. Now, if Tobias is out, we will likely be looking at Asar Thompson a bit differently. Thompson's 4,800. He's small forward, power forward eligible. I only gave him 22 minutes here, but if Tobias Harris happens to be out, I think you're probably giving Asar Thompson like 26, 27, 28, at which point you're getting a fantasy point per minute guy turning into a pretty good value for this slate. Fontecchio at the same time could probably get a little bit of a boost, but I doubt we're going to be going there too much. There's not really any ownership coming into Cade. 10-5 point guard only, 2% owned. Seems about right. Like, maybe you could argue Tim Hardaway Jr. is a hair under-owned at 4K. Shooting guard, small forward eligibility. But he's such a terrible per minute performer. 0.69 fantasy points per minute is where I have him in this game. Pistons losing 1.3 possessions below their average in this spot. So, I don't know. Not a priority here. Like, Duren getting 10%, I guess, makes some sense. I actually have Tim Hardaway as probably the quote-unquote best play. But this is another spot like the Lakers and Charlotte where I don't anticipate getting much. The Lakers are 22% owned in total. The Charlotte Hornets are 14% owned in total. The Pistons are 29% owned in total. I just don't see anything here that I would go crazy for. No priorities from the Detroit side. Now, Cleveland, No Karis LeVert, no Isaac Okoro, no Dean Wade. All three guys are already out, but they do have Evan Mobley back now. We're getting 18% ownership to Max Strus on both sites. We're getting 10% ownership to Darius Garland. And then we're getting very little to anybody else. Slow trickle to Ty Jerome. I don't find Cleveland to be all that appealing. Slightly slower pace for them as well. They clearly don't play big minutes in games that are getting out of hand. They're 10-point favorites. They're one of the bigger favorites on today's slate. You know, you want to tell me that Darius Garland should be in 10% ownership? Like, I agree. Strus, 4,400, shooting guard, small forward eligible. Played big minutes last time out, 34 or 35 or something like that. Let me look it up just to be clear. 35, yeah. So, you know, I only went 29 to Strus, but we did just see him play well north of 30 in a game without Dean Wade, in a game without Karis LeVert, in a game without Isaac Okoro. So it looks a lot like this one. So I get the value for Strus. Maybe a tad high. We'll probably create a little bit more value too throughout the day as more news drops. The good news is we only had one game yesterday. So from a injury report perspective, we've got a lot of information to start the day. That's really helpful. You know, if I'm ranking Cleveland, it's probably like Strus, Garland, and then take your pick on anybody else that's left. There's not a lot here that I'm super married to that I find interesting. Let's go to game number 3. Another game. This is Houston and Boston. Now, do I want to watch this game? Yes. Between Houston and Boston today, Memphis and the Knicks today, I mean, like, Clippers Phoenix is like mildly interesting as well. Houston Boston's a terrible fantasy game. 14% ownership to Houston, 19% to Boston. This might actually be, it's the second lowest owned game on the slate. Now we've got a Q tag on Cam Whitmore with an illness. Jabari Smith still out. But I mean, this Houston team is either priced where they're supposed to be or set in stone with their rotations. 8% ownership is coming in to Cam Whitmore at 3,800. Nobody else is higher than 4 on either site. Like, I got Dylan Brooks to 7% optimal. But what do we want to prioritize here for Houston? Massive pace down spot. I have them 3.2 possessions lower than their average here. I have them as a 97.2 pace. Because right now, Houston is 18th in the league. But the pace for this game is 94. This is slow. So how do you want to prioritize anything for Houston and Boston? Other than just thinking maybe a couple of these guys play 40 minutes in a competitive matchup. Maybe you get crazy playing time out of Amin Thompson. Maybe you get crazy playing time out of Van Vliet, Jalen Green. These guys play like 38, 39, 40 minutes, but I don't see anything to separate them. Are they a hair under-owned? Sure. Is it like anything that you want to take a stand on? Not to me. Another major problem for Houston is that so many of these guys don't have MPEs. Fred VanVleet, point guard only. Jalen Green, shooting guard only. Dylan Brooks, power forward. Alperen Şengün, center. Eason, power forward. You only get the MPEs on Whitmore and Amin Thompson. And don't get me wrong, Amin Thompson and Whitmore both have really good positional eligibility. They get guard and forward. But like Whitmore as a point per dollar play, yeah, he gets to 5x. I don't know. This is, again, it's another game where I don't think you're taking a big stand on any of the individual plays. Now, Boston could look a little bit different by the time we get to lock. Al Horford is questionable with a left big toe sprain. Derek White is questionable with a right shin contusion. Now, if everybody's in, we're clearly not liking the Boston side either. Pace down spot for the Celtics. Nobody on the DraftKings side owned more than 6%, which is Jason Tatum. Nobody on the FanDuel side owned more than 8%, which is Kristaps Porzingis. I didn't get anybody to double-digit optimal. I did get Jaylen Brown to 9%. I got Tatum to 8%. They're already 5% owned, so I don't think we're missing anything here for Boston. Now, if Derek White and Horford happen to be out, Then we're going to look quite differently at Luke Cornett, who will likely play enough minutes to be a value option. Porzingis probably looks a hair better at that situation. Drew Holiday and Peyton Pritchard both get a bit of a bump. Pritchard's at 4,800 now. If we happen to get Derek White out, Pritchard will probably end up being the best value option coming from Boston. I don't think we'd have anybody that we go that becomes like chalk. But if we can get White and or Horford out, Boston could look a little bit different here. Now, admittedly, I've got White and Horford in, and I've got this line right on the number. 6.5 for Houston. I got it at 6.6. So again, it's just there's the priorities here are low. You know, you want to play the bet, you want to play Alperen Şengün and Jason Tatum? Yeah, like for sure do that. There's plenty of other places that are getting a ton of ownership where they can be your pivots. There aren't guys on this team that you just look at and think these are going to be an essential piece of my, like, you know, say I'm playing 50 lineups. Basically, no one that we've talked about. Lakers, Hornets, Pistons, Cavs, Rockets, Celtics. Nobody in these games is going to be like a major stand. Zach Yarrington. I've noticed on these bigger slates, optimal and boom rates are lower all around. Am I misreading that? No. The optimal lineup can only have 8 guys in it. So you're always getting a total of 800%. The more guys and games that are on the slate, the thinner and thinner that gets. Same situation for me for the way that I calculate boom. It's basically double optimal. I basically want like 2 guys for every position. Again, that just... The boom rates come down, the target scores go up on these bigger slates. Where in the opposite side, if we had like a 3-gamer, you're more likely to hit your target score, and the target scores are a lot lower relative to salary. Like on a day like today, $9,700 Jason Tatum has a target score of 58.5. If this were like a 3-game slate, it would probably be like 49 or something like that. So everybody's a lot less likely to hit those big scores. But it's why pay-up options look more interesting on these big slates, because their chances of hitting outlier raw point scores are a lot higher than like just getting 8x out of, you know, Luke Cornett or Peyton Pritchard. All right, guys, hit that like button if you haven't done it yet. That would help out a ton around these parts. Schedule for the rest of the day. I guess I can get that out of the way right now. We've got the NHL strategy show coming up at noon. I will be back with Spags at 5 o'clock for the deeper dive, where we break down every single one of these games once again. Greg and Eric will be back at 6 o'clock for Live Before Lock. And then Greg and I will be on playback at 7 for Live After Lock, where we'll be watching games. You guys can watch games with us if you have League Pass, or we have 20 VIP passes that we could hand out so you could see it. Otherwise, it's just going to look like the deeper dive. You'll just see Greg and I. But we've got 2 7 o'clock games, 5 7:30 games. We're going to be reacting to news, ownership changes, late swap information, potentially some bets that we have in for the day. So should be a good time. You guys should come hang out. Playback's fun, man. Playback's fun. You want to be there. It's the best place to be for all of our late news. All right, Sacramento Kings, 10.5 point favorites in Brooklyn, 221 total. Kings are getting 38% ownership. Half of that is going to Malik Monk. He tends to be a little bit more owned in the morning, and then it comes down. I see Sacramento pretty much the same way I see Sacramento every night. You could roster any one of the starting 5. You're probably not rostering anybody else. They don't have anybody on the injury report that matters. I think Keegan Murray looks the best in terms of value. That usually changes by the end of the day. I actually think DeRozan, it's probably the second best option here for the Kings. 6,700 small forward eligible. I went 35 minutes. Man, I'm speaking all over my own words today. 9% optimal, 18% boom. Like, you need 45 out of Monk today, man. That's a big score. In a aggressively slow matchup. Brooklyn's the second slowest team in the league. And, Sacramento is like top half. This is a tough matchup for Sacramento from pace. But it's starters only. And I would rank them Murray, DeRozan, Fox, Monk, Sabonis. But again, any one of those guys can end up in a starting lineup or in a regular lineup for you. The real bad part of this game is the Brooklyn side. Brooklyn is 4% owned. They are the lowest owned team on the slate. 1% Clowney, 1% Russell, 1% a questionable Ben Simmons, 1% Day'Ron Sharpe. Simmons is really the only news we're waiting on. Cam Thomas obviously still out. Cam Johnson is out for this one as well. The most optimal I got of anybody on the Brooklyn side is 4% to D'Angelo Russell, 6,400 point guard, shooting guard eligible. Nick Claxton on FanDuel at 5,700. I think you could entertain that. He's $900 more expensive on DraftKings, but why in the world would we be going to Brooklyn here? Pace down spot for Brooklyn too, which is, unappealing. This game's awful. It's really, really difficult to look at Brooklyn and think I should play one of these guys. I mean, all their salaries are basically the same. 5,300, 51, 66, 6K, 64, 58, 55. All these guys just sit in the low sixes, mid fives. None of them deserve a real salary. D'Angelo Russell is 7,600 on FanDuel. The only way that you could play him there is on accident. You didn't mean to click it. You thought you were clicking Russell Westbrook or Bill Russell. You're never playing a $7,600 D'Angelo Russell. Even on 6,400 on DraftKings, that's $1,200 cheaper. He's still only 4% optimal. You need 42 fantasy points out of D'Angelo Russell. Brooklyn doesn't even feel like a team that can get 42 total. So this is the worst team on the slate based on optimal, based on boom, based on public ownership. It's all bad. That's not how you spell Orlando's acronym. So what is also bad is the Orlando Magic. They're 1-point favorites in Miami, 207.5 total. This is 12 points lower than the next lowest game. It's the slowest pace. I got it as, one of the slowest, or one of the lowest optimals, one of the lowest booms. They're the second lowest owned team. 2% to KCP, 1% to John Isaac, 1% to Paolo Banchero. Now, Goga is questionable. He's coming back from the concussion protocol. I have no idea what they're going to do at center now that everybody's back, if Goga's back. So I split the minutes, which means we're not playing Goga, and we're not playing Wendell Carter Jr. Suggs is questionable. He came back their most recent game. I only gave him 20 minutes. He's 7,700. There's no chance we're playing Suggs, no matter what. Unfortunately, Gary Harris still out with that hamstring strain. Now, you could tell me the Paolo Banchero at 8,600 should be more than 1% owned. You need 53 out of Banchero. I like Paolo Banchero today, no matter what the injury status is for Goga or Suggs. 8,600, Paolo Banchero, 1% owned. That's a guy I'm willing to pivot to in GPPs. KCP's been playing massive minutes. He's terrible on a per minute basis. 0.58 fantasy points per minute. But I get it if you want to go there for value. I don't know how you go to anything else. I don't know how you click on an 8K Franz. You can't go to the centers. De Silva and Anthony and Black, they're all dead now. So, only way that you're going to be able to get to anything here is if Jalen Suggs happens to be out, maybe Cole Anthony or Anthony Black becomes a little more interesting. But the only thing I see here for Orlando is a GPP pivot to Paolo Banchero. Now for Miami, kind of the same situation, but we can play where. Welcome back Jimmy Butler for today. Allegedly, he is not on the injury report at all. He's supposed to just be here. Tyler Hero's available. Only guy getting ownership. We got 14% total coming to Miami. 11% of that is going to Kel'el Ware. He's 5,900 on DraftKings, center only. He's 7,100 on FanDuel. So he's $1,200 cheaper on DraftKings. Looks great at 5,900. I got him 11% optimal, 27% chance of scoring 40 fantasy points. I think Ware should be 10 to 15% owned. This is one of the first guys we've gotten to that's just like, yep, that makes sense. We haven't had this yet, but he makes sense. Does anybody else make sense? Nope. I don't know how you go to Tyler Hero here. I don't know how you go to Bam. I really don't know how you go to Jimmy Butler. This is Khalil Ware and Khalil Ware only. Yeah, John, I'm pretty confident Jimmy Butler's not betting his unders. I can pretty confidently say that. There's no incentive in that one. Jimmy Butler makes too much money. So, yes, the slowest game with the lowest total is pretty unappealing. But Khalil Ware looks good no matter what. And Paolo Banchero looks like a quality pay-up pivot. DFS PhD. I went 33 minutes for Ware. I know it was a joke, John. All right, the second really awesome basketball game for today. Memphis Grizzlies, 3.5-point dogs in New York, 242 total. This is the second highest total on the slate. I've got it with the highest pace. Unfortunately for us, though, it doesn't look like we're going to get a ton of exposure, at least to the Memphis side. Now, this is a huge pace down spot for the Grizzlies. Memphis plays at the fastest pace of anybody in the league. The Knicks are 24th in pace. We have a Q tag on Santi Aldama and a Q tag on Jake LaRavia. Now, LaRavia has been out for a couple games. He has missed the past 3. Aldama's missed the last 2. If everybody's in, I don't know what you do here. Triple J for 8,100, power forward center eligible, 5% owned. I can get behind that a bit. I got Bane at 5% optimal. I got Wells at 5% optimal. I got Ja at 4% optimal. I'm not anticipating having much of Memphis. I want to watch the hell out of this game. And maybe if we get Aldama out and we get LaRavia out, maybe at that point we can entertain a conversation about value. Maybe you feel a little bit better about Wells. Kennard probably starts to look like a value option that you could get to. Maybe we're having a GG Jackson conversation if we get Aldama and LaRavia out again, but you can't go to GG Jackson if those guys are in. So the way that I'm seeing it, only guy that I would expect to get much of would be Triple J. You want to get Ja or Bane here? I could understand it. Do I think it's anything that you could prioritize? I don't. I really don't. Now, the Knicks side looks a little bit better because the Knicks side gets the pace up. Now, we know what they're going to do. We got a Q tag on Josh Hart. That will matter for value if we need it. We got 10% ownership coming into Towns. I have him 11% optimal, 30% chance of 59 fantasy points. We got 15% ownership to Brunson. Nothing to Bridges, nothing to Anunoby, 10% to Hart. But this is a massive pace-up game. I have the Knicks getting 3.7 possessions above their average. I have the Knicks for this game at a 96.6 pace. But the game is going to be played at 100.3. A huge pace-up spot for the Knicks. I like any one of the starters. But if I'm being honest, it's not as if they look so incredible. I think Hart should be 10% owned. I think Brunson should be 15. I think Towns should be 10. Anywhere in that range looks good to me. I think Anunoby and Bridges should probably be around 10 as well. Now, this is another thing that I've noticed for these morning shows. Anunoby and Bridges will project for more ownership at 5 o'clock tonight than they do right now. They'll be at 6 or 7. So I like the Knicks side of any one of the starters. Now, if Hart is out, we were going to like them probably a little bit more. Is Towns going to put Edey in foul trouble immediately? He might. If I'm ranking the Knicks, assuming Josh Hart is in, it would be Brunson, Towns, Hart, Anunoby, Bridges. You're not playing anybody else from the Knicks unless we get Hart out. At which point, we're probably looking at Precious. McBride probably gets a little bit of love. It's probably just Precious. for the most part. But what a great game. I mean, being able to watch Houston, Boston, and Memphis and the Knicks at the same time today is going to be... That's really good basketball. Yeah, I generally think that Josh Hart is playing anytime that he's questionable, so I assume he'll then not play, but... Yeah, I saw that tweet last night. Somebody's got to play defense. That's so good. All right, game number 7. We've got the New Orleans Pelicans. This is the third lowest owned team on the slate. They're 1-point underdogs in Toronto, 232 point total, 98 pace. After this game, we're going to start talking about guys that are getting ownership and the real value of the slate. It doesn't exist on New Orleans, unfortunately. The Pels right now, no Brandon Ingram, clearly. No Herb Jones, clearly. DeJounte Murray, questionable. Right elbow bursitis. Right index finger sprain. Tough time to be on DeJounte Murray's right arm right now. Assuming Murray is in, we will not be playing the Pelicans. 4% ownership coming into Murray. Nobody else has more than 1. Murray actually got to 5 on FanDuel. Most optimal guy I got for the Pels was 5% of CJ McCollum. So, you want to click Murphy or Murray or McCollum. I think you can do that. I don't know how you go to an $8,700 Zion. You want to get wild and roll the dice on a 5K Eve Misi? Sure. Now, if Murray is out, then we're probably looking at Jordan Hawkins a bit at 4,200. Alvarado might end up looking like an okay value at 4,100. Like CJ McCollum's going to get a bump at 7,600. We can find some guys that we could roster on the Pelicans if Murray is out. If he's in, there's a reason they're the third lowest owned team and pulling 7% as a whole. The Crafters on the opposite side are getting a little bit of love. Ochai Agbaji is questionable. Kelly Olynyk is questionable. Jakob Poeltl is questionable. Emmanuel Quickley is out for this one. Obviously, something is going to happen at center here, potentially. Like, if Jakob Poeltl is in, he doesn't look very interesting. But if he's out and Kelly Olynyk is in, Kelly Olynyk's 3,600. If they're both out, Orlando Robinson would likely get a decent chunk of playing time for the Raptors today. In their most recent game, Kelly Olynyk did not play. Orlando Robinson played 21 minutes. Played, we got 27 out of Jakob Poeltl. We got 21 out of Orlando Robinson. So, depending on the status of Jakob Poeltl and Kelly Olynyk, we might be able to talk about Orlando Robinson as a value play today. Put a pin in that one. We're getting 20% ownership to Grady Dick at 4,200. I think he looks fine. He's my second most optimal guy from Toronto. I don't mind the price. I expect that ownership to come down a bit, but looks like a completely reasonable value option at shooting guard if you guys want to get some Dick. But like Barnes, Barrett, Poeltl, Mitchell, they're all 5% owned-ish. I think Barrett looks the best at 7,700. I think Scotty's okay at 9,300. Yeah, I don't know. Mitchell's okay at 3,700 if he's going to keep playing 28 minutes a night. I would rank Toronto: Barrett, Dick, Barnes, Mitchell, Poeltl. But if we get one of those two centers out, Orlando Robinson will be interesting. If we get both of those centers out, Orlando Robinson will likely be pretty heavily owned. And then at that point, a $3,700 power forward center eligible Chris Boucher will work his way into conversations. So this is the first time where we've got a lot on the table for Toronto. They might look awful if everybody's in. But they might have some of the key value pieces if not. Now that concludes the 7 and 7:30 games. Before we go any further, there's a link in the description of this video. If you guys have any interest whatsoever on the sports betting side for OddsShopper and our Portfolio EV tool, if you've never signed up before, you can get a 7-day free trial. Costs you nothing. There's a link in the description. Click it. Sign up if you're in a legal sports betting state or if you've got pick'em sites that you want to sign up for or that you play. You can get our Portfolio EV tool for nothing. and check it out for a week. We take a market-based approach to beating the books. We give you projected win rates and expected value rates. We give you bet size calculations. You can mass enter bets if you want. We've got parlay builders as well. It's a great time to come in and see what we've got going on. And to use Portfolio EV and the OddsShopper tool, it's a great way to like mitigate your DFS play as well, because DFS is going to be highly volatile. This is using OddsShopper and the Portfolio EV tool is sort of like what everybody used to say cash games were, or like building out a bankroll. Now, I think you could build out your cash game bankroll using the Portfolio EV tool and then take your GPP shots on DraftKings. So I think it's a good way to supplement your bankroll, and you can check it out for no cost. So link in the description, guys. Come on in. Game number 8, 8 o'clock start. Denver Nuggets, 8-point favorites in Chicago, 246 total. The second fastest game on the slate. It's the highest total on the slate. We don't have any injury news on the Denver side that we are waiting on. And we're getting 40% ownership to Nikola Jokic at 12K. We're getting about 15 to Jamal Murray and Russell Westbrook. And then, minimal to Michael Porter Jr., Christian Brown, Aaron Gordon. Gordon's minutes slowly creeping up. Nikola Jokic is Nikola Jokic. Very good. You need 70 out of him at 12K. I mean, he gets a triple-double every night. Like, his median projection is 28, 12, and 9. I mean, just play him. I have absolutely no problem at all getting to Nikola Jokic. If you're looking for a pay-up today, that is definitely not the wrong way to go. Like, for Jokic right now, you've got 5 guys 10K or higher. Sabonis, LaMelo, AD, Cade, and Jokic. Jokic looks better than all of them. It is not even close. The premier pay-up option today is absolutely Nikola Jokic. Now, I think Murray should be around 15% owned. I have him 12% optimal, 25% boom. Westbrook looks very reasonable in that 10 to 15% range. I think Michael Porter Jr. and Christian Brown look really good in the 5 to 10% range. Jokic is massive, man. He's hanging monster numbers over and over and over again. And I have no idea why Chicago would be the team that slows that down. I mean, Vooch can't do it. That's for sure. The Bulls are 26th in defensive rating in terms of like team talent. Yeah, 115.7 defensive ratings, 26th. Our boy's going to carve these dudes up. I think like 25, 20, and 15 is on the table for today. So we've got our first extra special priority. That guy is Nikola Jokic. Now the Bulls side, not pulling much ownership. They don't look all that interesting. They're without Kobe White again for today. We got 15% ownership coming into Patrick Williams. And then, around 5 for Levine, Vooch, and Lonzo. Patrick Williams looks reasonable as a value at 3,800, especially with no Derek White. There's just a couple extra minutes to go around. Levine is my most optimal play here from the Bulls. 10% optimal, 5% owned. 8,100 shooting guard, small forward eligibility. I like that flexibility if you want to pay up for Levine. Like, if you've got Jokic in another lineup, there are way worse options than having Zach LaVine in there as well. But I don't see any priorities from Chicago. I'd rank the Bulls Levine, Williams, Vooch, Giddey, then whatever you want, I guess. It's a little bit of a pace down spot for Chicago, but the total here is great. There's a lot of raw points to go around. If I'm focusing on the Bulls, though, it's Levine, Vooch, Giddey, and Patrick Williams. And I'd like to be a little over the field on Zach LaVine. Could be showing out for a potential trade to Denver. Who knows? Yeah, Patrick Williams is not a fun guy to play for DFS, betting, any of it. It's all kind of bad. All right, game number 9. Now we're getting a little bit more ownership. The Atlanta Hawks. Now, there's essentially no way for us to talk about the Hawks right now. They're 10.5-point dogs in Minnesota, 219 total. Here's the problem with the Hawks and why we can't really do anything. One, they're already without Jalen Johnson. They're already without Trae Young. But we have questionable tags on Dominic Barlow, Mohamed Gay, both of those guys with the G League team, Daquan Plowden and Keaton Wallace, potentially with the G League team. Larry Nance is questionable, and DeAndre Hunter is questionable. So I'm guessing based on the Hunter news. Sorry, I missed one. Zachary Risache, also questionable. So depending on Hunter and Risache's status, I'm guessing that will depend on whether or not we get Barlow and Plowden and Mohamed Gay. But with no Trae Young, I'm assuming we get Keaton Wallace, and I'm assuming we get Keaton Wallace starting the same way that we did 2 weeks ago. Now, he went bananas in that game. We don't have to expect that to happen. We need to know that he's starting. But if Keaton Wallace is starting for the Hawks today, if he ends up from the G League team, point guard eligible, he's 3,800. He's 44% owned. I got him 24% optimal, 40% chance at 29 fantasy points. Keaton Wallace will be one of the top plays of the day, if not the top play today, as long as he is available to play and starting. So the problem here, we can't go any further on this Atlanta team. Between Wallace, Hunter, Risache, Nance, all the rest of the G League guys, there are no priorities here. It all depends on who's in and who's out. Grizzly says Bogdan. Yeah, it probably wouldn't hurt if I actually projected Bogdan Bogdanovic in the game. Go ahead and give Bogdan Bogdanovic his minutes, because for some reason I didn't. So let's get him in for 26, which could let me bring down those Nance minutes. We'll bring down Keaton Wallace. Bring down Garrison Matthews. Then we'll bring down Vit Krejci. Yeah, 4,400 for Bogdanovic looks like a decent value as well. Shooting guard, small forward, 5.2x salary, 0.88 fantasy point per minute guy. Yeah, Grizzly. I put his minutes and I skipped his name when I was going over it this morning. Yeah, he looks good. But again, we need all these Q tags to hash it all out. We need the starting lineup. As long as we know that Keaton Wallace is going to be available today, I think he's going to look good. Final game of the DraftKings site. Oh, sorry. We got to do the Minnesota side. My apologies. Not a lot going on the Minnesota side. 10% ownership to Jaden McDaniels. 10% ownership to Julius Randle. Essentially nothing else for the rest of Minnesota. Obviously, they're still without Dante DiVincenzo. McDaniels, to me, looks pretty clearly. Yeah, Justin Sports. Yeah, Bogdanovic will probably be in that 5 to 10% range to start. It all depends on the Q tags. Don't worry about the ownership on Atlanta right now. It's not really relevant. 5,300 for McDaniels. He's playing massive minutes right now. I got him in for 35. Should definitely be in that 10 to 15% owned range. Randall looks pretty good at around 10%. I'd say Ant is a hair under-owned at 9,200. Don't mind getting there. But Gobert doesn't look great. Naz Reid doesn't look great. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Conley, none of these guys look all that appealing. My focus would be McDaniels, Randall, and Edwards. That's the direction I would be looking here. But no priorities. Now, this line could look even crazier. If Risache ends up out, if DeAndre Hunter ends up out, this could stretch itself out even further, potentially. So I wish the Minnesota side looked better. It just doesn't. It's McDaniels and not much else. But the Atlanta side is going to be interesting. We just don't know how it's going to be interesting. Finally, the final game on the DraftKings slate. The 12-point underdog Washington Wizards in Dallas, 231 total. Full-strength Wizards other than Malcolm Brogdon. That means we're getting a little bit of ownership here for these Wiz. A little over 15 for Sarr, about 20 for Keyshawn George, around 10 for Jordan Poole. Single digits for everybody else. To me, Poole's the best option here. 10% owned, 12% optimal at 6,900. Minutes have been up a little bit lately. He looks perfectly reasonable to me in that 10 to 20 or 10 to 15% range. I'm a little surprised to see Keyshawn George getting the love. He's such a bad per minute guy. I don't mind having a little bit more of him just because it's the latest game, so it'll help for swaps, but I don't anticipate him being truly chalk. Sarr tends to get this ownership no matter what. Kind of just plays like 27 or 28 minutes every night. He's a fantasy point per minute guy. He's 5,400. You can put him in at power forward. Do I think he's a little overowned? Yeah. Do I think that he looks like an okay play? Yeah. I mean, a lot of Washington looks the same. 7% optimal on Koulibaly, 9 on Bub Carrington, 8 on George, 7 on Sarr, 7 on Kispert, even 6 on Joval. I don't know. If I'm ranking it, it's Pool 1 and then grab bag. Just pick a name out of a hat. Now, the Dallas side is the most owned team on the slate. They are twice as owned as any other team. We're getting 50% ownership to Kyrie, 50% ownership to Daniel Gafford, 30 to Omax Prosper, and then 10 to Dinwiddie, Grimes, and Klay Thompson. So obviously Dallas, no Luka, no Maxi Kleba, no Derek Lively, no Najee Marshall, no Dwight Powell. A lot of dudes missing here. So Kyrie looks great. 50% ownership certainly feels high to me. First Kings, you got to stop, man. First and foremost, Klay Thompson was never a Washington Wizard, brother. So I don't know what you're saying. Secondly, you're really annoying. Try to be better at both of those things. 1, try to just simply be correct. 2, try to be less of yourself. Do I think Kyrie should be 50% owned today? No, I don't. Do I think that he looks like one of the best pay-up options today? Yes, I do. Like, I've got Kyrie 9th in my contenders on DraftKings. He looks awesome. But if he's going to be 50% owned, and like Jalen Brunson's 16, and Ja is unowned, and Ant is unowned, and Barnes is unowned, like I'm never going to get there for that much. My guess is he ends up being 30%. Something in that neighborhood would be my expectation. But he looks great because there's nobody there. All right. Audio's dope. Let's see. I'll probably be done in 10 minutes. So you can come back in 10 minutes. Next level unintelligent person right there. Wild. Yes. Noted former Wizard Klay Thompson, who only played for the Golden State Warriors for his entirety of his career prior to this year. How do people even find YouTube with that logic? Anyway, Daniel Gafford. There's no Lively. There's no Maxi. There's no Dwight Powell. There's no centers left, man. They got Markieff Morris, I guess. Omax Prosper, I guess. Grimes looks great. Or Gafford looks great, rather. Do I think he's going to be 57% owned? No, that feels a tad high. I'm going to be honest. Do I think he's going to be 30 plus? Yeah. Is he a priority play today? Yes. Yes. Kyrie Irving, Daniel Gafford, cash lineups almost immediately. Now, Omax Prosper is a little different. I don't really know how much this dude's going to play. And I think we want to put a pin in his ownership for a bit. He played 4 minutes last time out, and we only had 11 minutes out of Maxi Kleba in that game. And that they were still without all those other guys. So I'm not a huge believer in that ownership of Omax. I honestly don't think Dallas looks great. But, PJ Washington looks reasonable. Dinwiddie and Grimes are all right options. I'm less of a fan of Dallas than the ownership shows. I'm very curious to see what this looks like when we get to the deeper dive and ownership and data is flattened out a bit more. But Kyrie Irving and Daniel Gafford, high level priorities for today. They have to be. They have to be. But, whether it's Jaden Hardy or Omax Prosper or Kessler Edwards, someone's going to be getting some additional minutes here and will look like a better play later on today. All right, final 2 games. FanDuel only. Bucks, Jazz. Milwaukee 9-point favorites in Utah. 236 total. Probable tags for Giannis here. Q tag for Chris Middleton here. And Bobby Portis is out for personal reasons. We have 40% ownership on FanDuel coming into Giannis. I think that makes a ton of sense. 11-7 power forward eligibility. Really easy to get to that sort of salary and position. I had him 18% optimal, 38% boom. I have him as my number 2 play overall on FanDuel. You're not really getting to much else from Milwaukee other than Giannis. It's kind of Giannis and nothing. A little bit of Brook Lopez would be okay. Minutes have been up lately and no Portis. Dame would be a real wild card. I would focus my exposure on Giannis heavily and Brook Lopez every once in a while. On the Utah side, I don't think you're doing anything, but we have no idea who's playing. Jordan Clarkson's questionable. John Collins is questionable. Walker Kessler's questionable. Colin Sexton is available. Jordan Clarkson got a little bit of ownership. Maybe you're going to Collins or Eubanks if Kessler ends up out, but we've got 80 minutes questionable right now on the Jazz. I don't think Markkanen looks very good. I don't think Keontae George looks very good. I don't think Isaiah Collier looks very good. I just don't think that you want much of Utah. Unless those 3 questionable tags end up out. At which point, then you'll find some Utah Jazz value. Final game, late night hammer, 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. LA Clippers, 1-point favorites in Phoenix, 223 total. 9% ownership to KPJ is the high mark for FanDuel. Otherwise, it's 3% to Amir Coffey. I got Coffey to 7% optimal, which is the highest mark. What I would recommend everybody do is not play the LA Clippers. Now, the Suns are a slightly different story. Ryan Dunn is out. So assuming we get Bradley Beal in the starting lineup, we will also not be playing the Phoenix Suns. Devin Booker is 2% owned on FanDuel. I had him 6% optimal. Those are the high marks for both teams. Neither one of those things look any good. I think you can largely skip Clippers Suns if you're playing on FanDuel tonight. But that'll do it, folks. 12 games up, 12 games down. Monster slate for today. Deeper dive's going to be big once we get all of this news. We're going to have a very different outlook on these games. Spags and I will break it down. Contenders video will be out shortly. Make sure you're hitting that like button on your way out the door. And let's hope that First Kings doesn't come back in the future. Thank you guys for being here. Sign up for Portfolio EV. Link in the description. 1 week free if you've never used it before. If you want to do sports betting or pick'em sites, guys, it's the best tool in the industry. First day of the week in the books. 4 more to go. Light work tomorrow, I believe. I don't think we have too many games. Let's check. Let me check the schedule. We got 4 games tomorrow. 11 on Wednesday, 5 on Thursday, and 7 on Friday for the final day of January. Good luck, everybody.